Hello, my name is Protik Mukhopadhyay. I'm an entrepreneur and an author. I'll be hosting the Reimagine Sales Systems podcast, where I'll be bringing some of the industry thought leaders who will be sharing their go-to-market strategies for their business systems.
All right, everyone listening in today. I have today a good friend and somebody I've worked with, Michael Goldberg. He is leading the revenue ops at OneLogin. We'll get to hear a little bit about his journey with us today. And with that, I want to open the first question to Michael. Michael, we're curious to know about your journey with us in the enterprise world. Can you share a little bit with our listeners today?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. Great to be here talking to you and being able to share different things that have gone on. But I'm looking my career. Kind of starting
Mm-hmm.
out. Many years ago, even back before SaaS was cool.
Right.
I was launching software subscription programs with a telecommunications test equipment manufacturer, and so that was kind of early career for me. And maybe got the sense that, hey, I could see where things were going and what made sense in the world. And then I kind of moved to this inbound supply chain software company. So it was kind of in software and test equipment early on. And I was a revenue analyst for them, and I got to see in all the different pieces that were coming together. And that company eventually got acquired right around the same time as I went back to school to get my MBA and get educated and get a better understanding of what was going on in business, right? Because my early bachelor's was in psychology, and I had also run my own business on the side. But I was still early in my career and getting to know business. But after subsequent to the MBA, I came back and joined one of the top five mobile phone companies providers. And I was a sales analyst for those guys, sort of in the sales world, getting sort of, cutting my teeth in the sales world. And I supported the Northern California region before they got acquired by another one of the big players. But at that point, my understanding of mobile and what was happening, I then realized that, there's only a certain amount of time you're going to be selling mobile handsets. And at that point, I moved
Right.
into a mobile content provider. So company was doing content, so games and other applications for mobile handsets, because that was another large growth area.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I actually I also tried something different, right? So I was in kind of a sales analysis, and I kind of moved into financial planning and analysis. So kind of running a couple parallel paths here where I'm trying different things and I'm trying different industries, and those are kind of things that run through my career and maybe other folks as well. But from there, after a couple years there, realizing that the content companies were kind of getting squeezed from licensors on one side and the providers on the other side, and getting there's very little opportunity to make a large amount of revenue. I moved into a construction software. So
Mm-hmm.
another software provider, prior to SaaS, but actually I was supporting this SaaS products with that vendor and helping them establish their SaaS methodologies, and helping them grow and build that SaaS knowledge in there. And after a little while of that, I actually had an opportunity to leave and join Salesforce, their CRM provider. And I was supporting the Customers for Life organization over there, building the support and training elements from an FP&A standpoint. And after a little bit of that, cloud storage was also another large growing space. And I went over to cloud storage, and I had an opportunity to head up
Mm-hmm.
sales operations, which was kind of my first foray into sales ops, um, and helped build and grow that piece of the business. And it was ultimately sold off. And at the same time, while that was sold off, I had an opportunity to go back into construction. There was a construction application provider, which had drawings on mobile devices, and head up their sales ops team and grow and scale that organization. So we were growing sales reps across the country, and it was just really fast moving, really great. And eventually, those guys got acquired by the previous construction vendor that I worked for. So, but I had already left those guys to work on a digital transformation application, and that was really cool. And it was sits on top of, kind of your Salesforce and helps give users a better better experience from the user interface perspective. And to build it, it was less coding and more drag and drop, right? So
Right.
kind of definitely evolution. And then, from there, I ended up where I am today at OneLogin, an identity and access management provider, top. And I'm heading up actually the global operations team. So kind of from sales ops, build out with marketing ops and sales enablement. And so now I own global ops.
Wow, that's quite a journey, Michael. Thanks for sharing that. And it's really amazing to see that you have so much experience, not only in subscription and revenue ops, but also the background with finance, because I think that really helps put things in perspective. Uh, if we were to take a kind of a deep dive on, let's say, your last 2 or 3 companies, uh, can you share a little bit about how do they go to market, and how does your role in sales and RevOps help them to achieve those strategies?
Yeah. So kind of from, there've been
Mhm.
more like startups, right? So
Right, right,
I started, earlier in my career, I was with large and small companies, but now I've kind of focused a little bit more in the startup space. But
right.
on the go to market, right, the engines for, a construction provider that is, both is worldwide, but providing construction data on a handset device, we had a very much a direct sales force. Plus, we built out some partnerships with other applications that we were complementary with. So sometimes we would go to market together with those guys, but very much like a direct sales force, and just building and scaling and having people that can, touch every corner of every state in the United States, for example. And we grew and scaled the sales team, from like 30 to 60, and we were going for 100, sales reps on the ground, visiting construction sites and selling the application and demoing the application, on the ground. From those guys, the next one, the digital transformation provider, we were very much a direct sales team with heavy on the sales engineering side to kind of help customers first, do custom demos, but also build up the adoption when they purchased. And we had a lot of professional services type resources that could help folks get up and running. It was a very demanding kind of a thing, because you had to build stuff from scratch, right? But here, now a little bit better here, we've
Mm-hmm.
got a go-to-market team, which is a combination of a direct sales team, which is both territories and segments, and enterprise commercial segments. But we also have a great partner network. We're building out partners to support enterprise, but also SMB, and we've got strategic partners for that enterprise support, and we've got MSPs as well. So a lot of different ways to get into the market and to support a lot of different types of customers.
Uh, that's really interesting. Now, in your journey, right, going back on the go-to-market strategy, we've always seen direct partners and then resellers. But any other modes that you have seen that might be unique, maybe to a certain industry or a vertical, or when you do subscription?
Yeah, I mean, we had, in mobile phones, we've got, the whole mom and pop,
Mm-hmm.
network of stores across the
Right.
country, supporting the growth and sales and being where customers want to be and want to purchase your tools.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, VARs and value added resellers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just definitely experience with a lot of different ones depending on the application. And to some degree, more in when I was in hardware space, sort of folks who were associated with hardware applications would bring more of those types of channels in play, and that made more sense for those guys.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Thanks, Michael. Now, let's talk a little bit about systems, right? I think monetization and trying to focus on revenue growth is very critical for, I would say, mature startups that you lead. So, what kind of systems do you think is required to realize some of the strategies that are, let's say, defined with sales and go to market teams, so that you are able to either focus on adding value with reporting or enabling sales team to be more efficient? But uh, if you can share a little bit about what systems that you have seen in place to be critical, and what systems you feel are sort of good to have. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, the evolution from,
Mm-hmm.
Salesforce, and then all the associated, the ecosystem that Salesforce has built up around Salesforce is primarily where I've played, the last part of my career. And I have a very interesting viewpoint into, making sure that, to become data driven, you have to do two things. You have to pick the right systems, and you have to integrate them together and make sure that you can have that reporting layer on top of the data that you're capturing. So definitely be clear about defining the data and what you want to capture, and then especially knowing downstream what you're going to use that data for, as you're evolving those systems. So, and when I say evolving, it's always, I've inherited the systems and I've got to make them operate 10 or 20 times better than they are when I first sit in that chair in front of them. So, like Salesforce is a critical one. I find that's mostly in the center of the universe, because you've got things coming from the upstream in marketing, and, potentially bringing in product and customer data, and making sure you're completing your sales and passing those closed won opportunities downstream to your finance system. So you got a lot of different things involved, and it really can become the center of the universe in terms of, where people need to go to get the information they need to do their business, right? So, and within Salesforce, adjacent systems, we've got sort of the reporting and dashboarding types of tools that, Salesforce does a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
They're working with Tableau to do better on that. But, we've got our own third-party tool integrated that gives us, our sales folks, really good insight into the data and how it's moving and changing on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, and to give them a really strong understanding, and know when things are changing, right? And we've got, data that supports the sales team themselves, and how do they, manage the opportunities? How do they keep their forecasts updated? How do they reach out and find new opportunities? How do they receive opportunities from marketing and the SDR teams? And how do they make sure they have the right information around those to know what the next step is, in regards to the opportunity?
Awesome. You touched a little bit on Salesforce and adjacent technologies, but in terms of platforms, not platform vendors, but we hear things like quote to cash, lead to cash. We hear terms like order management. Uh, for a company, let's say that's sort of a mature startup, CDC funded, 1,000 employees, 100 salespeople. What's your typical stack look like? And it's obviously based on industry and how they go to market, but beyond Salesforce, what else would you do if you didn't have a budget limitation, which is sort of not the right way to put it, but ideally, right? Yeah.
Yeah, totally. No, I think if you get to
Right.
1,000 employees, then and 1,000 employees, 100 salespeople,
Right.
you're going to have relatively mature systems if you've managed it
Right.
correctly along the way, right?
Right.
And look, we're a little bit short of that at this point, but I know the direction we're heading, and we've been there, sort of with some of the previous companies I've been at. But what you'd be looking at is, good, a mature marketing ecosystem, core system, plus a few, adjacent systems, that can hand off data cleanly to Salesforce and get, the leads and the lead routing to the right people who need to get them. And then you got the, visibility and potentially, some of the stuff that we're doing with, AI and machine learning to try and identify what are the higher, higher value opportunities even in your pipeline today. Which ones should you be really doubling down on, and which ones should you be focusing a little bit less on, to get to your number? So machine learning and AI is big stuff, and especially if you're a larger vendor, larger company, as you get to that size, you need to be looking at those kinds of applications. But you've got to have the, like you said, quote to cash is critical. And I'll be honest, we're not quite there yet. We have it on the roadmap, and we're working on funding for next year. But we've done a big update on our pricing and our pricing model this year, and we're doing all the foundational steps that'll put us in the right direction of getting there. We are very aware of subscription management types of tools that would associate with CPQ and contract management. But I've implemented them at former places, but not at our current place. So looking at things like
Right.
that, how to get there as the company grows and scales. And obviously, good integration with a good, solid finance system downstream is critical. And look, I'll point to one thing that we did a couple companies ago. Look, when you and I worked together, we built
Right.
a custom custom admin console that allowed the customers to purchase when they needed to and instantly provision licenses, so we didn't slow them down. They could run as fast as they needed to, and they could just do a bunch of add-on orders, and they were all standardized to the original contract and pricing. And we would just be able to turn around 30 days later and send out an invoice. So we did that, helped the business grow and scale significantly. And one of the factors I think that made them attractive to later acquisition. So some great stuff.
Let me kind of change our gears a little bit in terms of best practices, right? So we know that any successful operational role that somebody like you leads is a combination of people, process, and technology. So can you share a little bit of your lessons learned maybe in the last few years that our speakers can take away? Like, how should we be thinking about constraints, people, processes, that if you had a chance, you could have done it differently?
Yeah. So let's start with technology, because that's where you're
Sure.
going to grow and scale the business best, right? And in terms of learning, you walk into a place and everybody's throwing things at you as an ops leader,
Right.
and everyone's asking you for this system, that system, the other system, and you have to kind of understand and drive what your company can digest best, right? So you need to make sure you're picking the right systems, you can integrate them and build streamlined processes, and keep your customers happy. For us, it's the sales team.
Right.
At the same time, you can't blow the budget, right? So a lot of times for me, it's a look at, initially explore and understand what systems are already in place and either improve them or rationalize them, right? So get rid of the systems that have duplicate functionality, double down on systems and companies. I look for vendors that are building out rapidly and providing value and supporting their customers, which would be me, really well. So there's folks that do well at that and folks that don't do so well at that. So I want to see incremental functionality rolling out on a quarterly basis. I want to see a product vision that potentially scales out into some platform functionality. Rather than me having to buy 5 vendors, I prefer to purchase one that can provide 5 functions or 5 solutions for me. So I'm looking, a lot of times at platform vendors who can provide a broad scope of solutions. And then, occasionally, look, we also bring those, best in class point solutions into play. And we recently have done a couple of those because they're doing something different and more valuable than what anyone else out there is doing today. Right. And, we're testing them out and piloting them to make sure they're going to be successful. And then we're bringing them in if we do have that success. So, lesson learned, don't buy too many tools, and, try and leverage the ones you have, or if you're not using them, do your best to get rid of them quickly. So, and that, that follows that, your processes within those systems, then, you can streamline your processes much better. As long as your data is flowing cleanly between systems, and your people, as well as your people and your extended teams that you support, can either access the data from those systems more directly and not have to sit back and ask for information, or not have a good understanding of what's going on if they don't have visibility into those systems. So, definitely drive visibility out versus having people rely on you all the time for information and updates.
That's great. We're almost at the end of our discussion today, Michael, but
I'm having too much fun.
few more questions. I think these are more personal in nature. So I really like the journey you described. I really see the value you can bring to any organization, both from your financial background the fact that you studied psychology in your undergrad, and the way you have helped your other startups. Now, what would you look in someone if you were to hire them in your team? What are some of the skills that you are hiring for that someone should aspire to develop, as they are also looking to develop a career, and maybe 5-10 years from now they can become the next Michael Goldberg?
Yeah, what's interesting is, and
Right.
from the many interviews and stuff I've done, the first thing I really want to look for is passion, right? Do they have a passion for ops, and are they can they convey to me that they enjoy what they're doing, and to get into areas where they're constantly uncovering problems and constantly fixing problems. So I want to see someone who is like a lifelong learner, who does want to get certain things, potentially certifications in the different systems, very system oriented, but they must convey that they really they enjoy what they're doing, not that they're here to get a paycheck, right? And so I ask questions, a lot of times in regards to, what are you looking for, and how do you evaluate this role, and why is this the right thing for you? And I try and tease out anything I can from them, and to make sure they're in it for the right reasons. And then I want to look for, what do they think the career is, and what are the career path is. And I love, as a leader, to support those folks, right? So I've supported and I grow my people. I look for them. I have my current Salesforce administrator. She got her certification while I was managing her. My previous one also got her certification while I was managing her. And I want people to be improving their skills, and because everyone comes with a certain set of skills, and there's a bunch more that they can add to their playbooks. So I want them to be learning and growing, and it definitely shows me motivation when they go off and they spend their own time studying and taking these exams, and coming back when they're super excited about being successful at those.
Thank you. That's a lot of insights for somebody trying to get a career in RevOps and Sales Ops. What are your priorities, Michael, in 2021? I know with COVID, some companies benefited, some companies probably had to take a step back. But in your current role at your current organization, how was 2020, and how do you see 2021 now kind of changing or becoming a priority from 2020?
Yeah. Well, 2020 was, I would say it was good on a personal basis for me, but I understand from a lot of people that, and look, I've had my challenges as well. So not everything was good, but, the priorities, have been a large, cleanup, a lot of cleanup exercises we've accomplished this year. But I knew at the beginning, even prior to when this whole thing hit, that we were going to be doing a lot of legacy tech debt resolution. And I knew that but we also had to do projects that were going to move the business forward. So, we've done, I inherited systems that had potentially 5 or more previous owners that never really did a lot of cleanup, or, kind of looked at things deeply to resolve them more, so they would look like they were just trying to solve their own problems and building on top of each other. So we've stripped back a lot of stuff. We've removed 30, 40 gigabytes of dirty data from our systems and got it running a lot smoother. We've fixed a lot of integrations. These were all of the priorities. At the same time, we've implemented quarterly data hygiene process. We've done some I mentioned AI and machine learning, but we've also launched what was called the buyer's journey this year, where we've bridged that gap between marketing funnel visibility and sales opportunity visibility. And we've created a custom object that we've got data and analytics around, so we can follow all the lead flow, all the campaign attribution, all the timing around how things are moving through the funnel, the conversion rates, things like that. So we've done a really great project. And at the same time, we're still looking at, even next month, ripping and not replacing, ripping and coding in place of a system that's in the stack that's causing us problems that we no longer need. So a variety of things, and even priorities going forward, and we spent some time this quarter doing it, was kind of getting a good roadmap together and knowing the projects that our customers are looking for down the road, and trying to figure out how do we get those budgeted, or how do we get them completed with the existing resources that we have in place today. So, obviously we'll be getting feedback on that shortly, since our budgeting cycle is happening right now. But we'll be launching in Q1 with, updating the information, the feedback we get, and starting to run some of those projects as well.
Awesome,
Yeah.
Michael. It's been a pleasure. We got to learn about your journey, your role in helping mature startups, as well as I think the feedback you had for someone pursuing a career in RevOps, of having passion, and then some of the priorities you shared. So it's been a pleasure talking to you, listening to you, and I would welcome any suggestions or feedback you have for me. But with that, we'd like to kind of thank Michael for his time today. And anyone, Michael, who wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way they can connect with you?
Probably reach out to me on LinkedIn, and really appreciate you having me today. Thanks. It's been a great experience, and we'll look forward to our paths crossing here in the near future.
Thank you, Michael.
So with that, I would like to wrap up this podcast. Thank you all for tuning into Reimagine Enterprise Sales Systems. To listen to more exciting podcasts, please visit my website, protikm.com or protikm.com, where you can subscribe to the show in iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcast, and other channels that you follow, so that you'll never miss your show.